Everybody. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're joining in from. My name is Arpit Chaturvedi. I am the Joint Director of the GPODS Fellowship, the Global Policy, Diplomacy, and Sustainability Fellowship. I'm joining you guys from New Delhi right now. And here is how the day goes today. We are going to spend a little bit of time talking to you about what GPODS is, what the fellowship program is all about. And thereafter, we are going to have an interaction at about 7 p.m. Indian Standard Time with Ambassador Jason Matthew Hall, who's the ambassador of Jamaica to India. One thing which is really interesting to know is that Jamaica has sent the first High Commissioner to India, and that is Ambassador Hall. Before this, the Jamaican High Commission in India did not have a resident High Commissioner over here, even though India's relations with Jamaica go a long, long way. So what I would encourage you is to ask a lot of questions to His Excellency when he comes and joins us. And please do introduce yourself whenever you're speaking to His Excellency, and ask very short and pointed questions. He will first give a speech of about 20 minutes, after which I will ask him a couple of questions, post which I will open it out to the audience. And then you can just raise your hands. You can see the reaction button over there. And you raise your hands, we'll invite you to unmute yourself, then you introduce yourself and ask your questions. And feel free to ask whatever question that you feel like asking. No question is a bad question. And you can be pretty easy, pretty informal. So that's the idea today. Before that, what I want to talk about with you is the GPODS Fellowship, and I'm just going to share my screen and take you through this particular fellowship program that we have started. All right. Are you guys able to see my screen? For as many people as possible, if you can turn on your cameras, if comfortable, that would be really, really nice. If not, if you're, in your metro or tube or driving around, then have a safe ride. I completely understand. All right. So the GPODS Fellowship is essentially the Global Policy, Diplomacy, and Sustainability Fellowship. We were not very innovative with the name. It literally means global policy, diplomacy, and sustainability. And this is a 3-month learning program. Think of it as a global academy that runs for 3 months. That gives you a chance to interact with some of the top leaders in the fields of public policy, diplomacy, and sustainability, and learn from them as to how they made their careers, as to what are the important questions and important things that they are working on right now, and how you can make a career which could be like them, or newer career paths that you will forge ahead as leaders of tomorrow. In the past, we've had young diplomats, young NGO workers, people who are looking out to pursue higher education abroad or in different parts of the world. People who are working in the corporates who want to make a career switch, or in general just learn more about public policy, diplomacy, and sustainability, apply to the fellowship and become fellows. So just a little background on this fellowship program and how we started. Ishan, who's my co-founder, he's in Stanford right now, and it's 5:30 a.m. so he has not been able to join us too early over there. But we started this fellowship program at the peak of COVID. So just at the beginning, when we were trying to understand what COVID is, the lockdown had just been promulgated. So I'm talking about fall 2020, where we realized that there's not many programs which are there, which are able to connect different leaders from all over the world and use their knowledge in this new space of cyber learning, or learning over the internet, over these Zoom calls in which we are talking right now. And remember, that was a time where people we got a lot of calls from different sort of people asking about what they can do to advance their careers, because this was a time where physical conferences had stopped. This was also a time where a lot of colleges had gone online, and we saw that in this time of crisis, this would be sort of a silver lining in the cloud, that we can come up with a program that really takes advantage of the online medium of learning and connect folks to people that they would have otherwise not have been able to connect with. So, all of these folks in the UN, all of these folks in the World Bank, in other international agencies, it's difficult to get them, typically, our mentors in every cohort are coming in from 8 to 10 different countries. Our fellows are coming in from 8 to 10 different countries. And doing that physically would just not have been possible, except for the fact that you have billions and billions of dollars and you can set up an Ivy League sort of a university. So we thought that the online medium helps us do that at a fraction of a cost. So we embarked on this fellowship program called GPODS. Now, starting out with this fellowship program, what we learned was that the three things that a lot of people, even in Indian public policy schools, were not talking about were the intersections between public policy, diplomacy, and sustainability. And what do I mean by that? Any problem that we are facing in the society, whether it is air pollution, whether it is about water scarcity, or about health, such as COVID that we went through, they're not exclusively a public policy problem. They are not exclusively a political problem. They're not exclusively a sustainability problem. If I were to give you an example, this is the typical one that I use. Look at, air pollution. And, for those who are in India, we always, we've been exposed to air pollution, especially if you're around the Delhi area and in the northern plains. And what happens over there is that air pollution is definitely a problem of sustainable development. But there are many ways to deal with air pollution. You could absolutely ban polluting industries. So banning is one policy alternative. Okay. You can tax industries which pollute. You can, get industries to trade carbon credits with each other. And for those who are following the recent legislative moves, the carbon trading bill has just been tabled in the parliament a few weeks back. So that means that sustainable development as an issue has various policy alternatives to choose from, whether you tax or you trade or you ban. Okay. Each of these policy alternatives throws up different winners and losers. Okay. So if you're planning about banning, then a lot of these industries are absolute losers, and even the consumers of the products of those industries are absolute losers. If you're talking about taxing, then industries lose a little, consumers lose a little, because taxing increases the price of the products. If you're talking about carbon trading, that is more efficient from the perspective of the producer and trader. But what that leads to is that a lot of people would just keep trading in carbon emissions. That doesn't mean that the overall emissions might come down. So there are different winners and losers for each of these policy alternatives to a particular problem. And managing the interests of these winners and losers is the realm of politics, is the realm of diplomacy when you talk about in the international terms, on the international stage. So a lot of these institutions were really not talking about the intersections of public policy, intersections of diplomacy, intersections of sustainability. And we thought that through this program, we could really create an ecosystem of people who could focus and learn more about how these intersections work with each other. Because if you want to solve real problems, you need to understand all three of them. And unfortunately, in our world of hyper specialization, a sustainability expert is mostly learning just about sustainability, not enough about politics. A public policy expert is just looking at public policy from a very scientific way, probably not thinking about politics or not thinking about sustainable development so much. And people who are in politics, they are only thinking about winning elections or getting the right coalition in place, but not thinking about sustainability or not very much educated on public policy in general. So this is a program which is 3 months long, and it takes place online so that it can give you an ecosystem where your co-learners and your teachers or your faculty are from all over the world, and that gives you a perspective which is not only rooted in reality of your own, but is rooted in realities of different parts of the world. So you can exchange notes, and that sort of a learning really gives you the tools and the means to think about a particular problem from many different perspectives. So that was the idea behind the GPODS fellowship. Okay. Now, essentially, as I told you, this program is spread over 3 months. It has 3 tracks: public policy, diplomacy, and sustainability, quite intertwined with each other. Okay. We have about 3 courses, and these 3 are 20-hour long courses each. I'm going to talk about that. 5 workshops and 40 plus mentors with whom you interact over these 3 months. Okay. So, as I already told you, the vision was to interact, to create a global network of leaders and empower them to bring about effective change through these 3 tools: policy, diplomacy, and sustainability. And the mission, the definition of mission, and this is something a lot of people get confused in: what's the difference between a vision and a mission? So vision is an end state, what you really want to do. And mission is the things that you will do over and over and over again to achieve your vision. So you have the vision over there. The mission is what are the things that we do over and over again. We interact, we immerse through various projects. So we have capstone projects, which are real life projects with which you'd be working on. And we'll talk a lot more about that. You involve, which means that you interact with different people, you involve different stakeholders, whether these are people from the corporates or from the NGOs or from politics. You involve them together in the problems you're trying to solve. And with that, the whole of the ecosystem evolves. So those are the things that we do over and over and over again to achieve the vision that we have over here, right? Now, so far, this is a map that still needs updating. Now we have a lot more countries which are covered, but our fellows have come from, obviously, India. That is where majority of the fellows come in from. But we've had a lot of fellows coming in from a lot of different countries. You have Ghana, you have Trinidad, you've got Australia, Indonesia, Germany, UK, US, Canada, and many other countries. I know we've had fellows from Peru, we've had fellows from Mexico. So in a particular cohort, you can imagine that every day you're learning with people from so many different experiences and backgrounds, and that in itself is a great perspective builder for anybody. All right, so what is the fellowship structure? These are essentially the 5 pillars of the fellowship program. Okay. The first 3 pillars are the more important pillars. These are sort of the stronghold of the fellowship program. These are courses, workshops, and mentorship. Now, courses are to build your knowledge, workshops are to build your skills, and mentorship is to build your networks and give you exposure. Okay? We offer 3 courses to develop your knowledge. These are all graduate level courses. So what we do, we sit down with the top courses. We look at the syllabi of courses which are being taught in the Oxfords, the Stanfords, the Cornell universities of the world. And we combine the best aspects, the best readings, the best topics out of those courses and condense it to 20-hour. Typically, graduate level courses are 45-hour long. If you're doing a master's program, typical course length is 45 hours. We condense it to 20 hours over here as part of the fellowship program. And we offer these 3 courses. You'll be able to see each of these courses touches on one of the aspects of public policy or diplomacy or sustainability. The first course is the Comparative Public Administration course. This is a course that I teach. I studied at Cornell University. I did my Masters of Public Administration over there before doing my MBA from India from Symbiosis. And after I graduated from Cornell, I taught at the San Francisco State University and also at the Indian School of Public Policy later on. And at San Francisco State University, I was teaching, and I still engage with them as a guest faculty. And I teach this 45-hour-long course called Comparative Public Administration. And this is a particular course in which we talk about comparing governance structures across different nations. So questions such as, how does the healthcare policy of India or the education policy of India differ from, let's say, the healthcare or education policy of Singapore and the United States? Okay. And then we compare and contrast to learn that what are the policies in different countries that we can apply tailored to our context. It is a logical class which focuses on how do you learn from others and modify, certain aspects of their successes to the benefit of your own country. Okay, so that is what the Comparative Public Administration course is about, and I teach that course 20-hour long. The second course that we have is the International Political Economy and Diplomacy course. The International Political Economy and Diplomacy course is, he was with me at Cornell University and is now a member of the steering committee of the UN South-South Cooperation. That's a UN body that works on problems of the global South. He's worked in various agencies, including Deloitte, including as a political risk consultant, and is very well known in the international organization circuits. He, as well as Jasmine Mehta, who's from the London School of Economics and works as an ESG consultant, is a vice president of a ESG consulting firm in London. She co-teaches this course called IPE and Diplomacy. The third course is Global Commons Seminar Series on Sustainability and Climate Change. That's taught by my co-founder, Ishan. Ishan is a graduate of the Stanford Law School. He is also, he was very recently also the vice dean of the Jindal School of Environmental Studies, and he teaches this global seminar series on sustainability and climate change. So these are 20-hour long courses that you're taught in the fellowship program. So if you're especially planning to go for a master's program or delving deeper into the current debates, the current challenges, the current theoretical aspects of any of these pillars, policy, diplomacy, and sustainability, they give you a very deep knowledge, because in mentorship you can just connect with people, but if you are a very well-networked person who does not possess cutting-edge knowledge, you would not be taken seriously. So these courses prepare you to develop that sort of a knowledge foundation. Now, the second pillar is about the skills. Now, skills are really courses to develop your long-term understanding and knowledge. Skills are the things that will make you more employable right away. Okay, so we went to the World Economic Forum in 2020 in Davos, and we conducted focus group discussions with a number of global leaders who were heads of Fortune 500 companies, who were heads of various ministries, who were legislators, and we asked them a couple of very simple questions. Number one question was that what are the skills do you think are important in your organization? And those are the skills that people may be lacking in. Okay. And the second question we asked them is that what are the skills that you think will become important in the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? And those are the skills that people may not possess as of now. And the answers that we got were the following. Number one was effective writing and communication. Number two was fundraising. Number three was complex problem solving. Number four was thinking in terms of circular economy, planning things from perspective of circular economy. And finally, uh, there was another one that we've added now. So we have 5 workshops now. So 6 workshops now instead of 5. That is program design and evaluation. And what we did was that some of the skills that you see over here, some of the workshops that you see over here, they are workshop series. Some of them are standalone workshops. So the first one, which is the policy writing and communication lab, that's a workshop series. And that's again something that I co-teach along with a number of globally renowned journalists. And I had served as the chief editor. I was actually the first, probably the first non-American chief editor of the Cornell Policy Review, which is the official public policy publication of Cornell University. And then I serve on a number of editorial boards, including the Defense and Intelligence Norway, which is a security publication based out in Norway. And here, what we do is that we teach you about how to edit an article, how to understand structures of the article, how to write articles, how to write op-eds, how to write policy memos. Because a lot of times, whether you're in the government or the private sector, at the top tier level, you would have to write in terms of memos, and a lot of people don't understand what memo writing is all about. What I also do as part of this workshop is that I would not let you write an article before you learn how to edit an article. And the idea is that if you are not a good editor, you can hardly be a good writer, because you would not have the discernment, you would not have the means to differentiate between an average article and a good article, or a good article and a great article. So first, we give you a lot of practice, get your hands dirty. That's why it's called a lab, to write or first edit a lot of articles, and then get into the writing phase. So that's the policy writing and communication lab. Then we have fundraising and grant writing, which is led by a colleague of ours who is a master fundraiser, has helped a lot of fundraising efforts in India. Then we have systems thinking and case studies in public policy. This is for complex problem solving, and this is co-taught by a number of experts, where we give you real life case studies, we give you real life frameworks, and those case studies are not business case studies, they are policy, diplomacy, and sustainability case studies, and we help you solve those case studies through those frameworks and understand the various approaches that you're taking to solve some of these really, really difficult problems that real world is facing right now. Okay, so that's the one with case studies. And then we have a workshop in circular economy and climate change that helps you think, how do you design organizational processes, practices, strategies, so that you create minimal environmental waste. Okay. And finally, you have program design and evaluation, where a friend of ours who consults a number of UN agencies talks to you about how do you design projects, how do you evaluate projects, how you create logical frameworks, etc., etc. The third is mentorship. And this is the place where we get a lot of experts from all over the world. You can go to our website and look at the mentors who are coming in the upcoming cohort. I can probably give you a snapshot over here. You have, professors from some of the top universities. So you see Professor John Calabrese over here, who's a professor at the American University. You have Mr. Suresh Kumar, who was the former Chief Principal Secretary to the Chief Minister of Punjab. Similarly, you have people from the UN who are going to be joining this particular fellowship program. You have the CEO of Space Foundation, etc., etc. So you have 40 plus mentors who are coming into this program, and you can find a list of all of those mentors on our website. But here's a snapshot of that. I just want to check before we move ahead. I think we have His Excellency already with us over here. So I want to check if His Excellency is there and if we are all set to start. else, we will share further details about our fellowship program and wait for His Excellency to join in. Shrishti, if you could help me check and confirm if Ambassador Hall is already with us.
Hi, good evening. I am here, but I'm having, as I had mentioned earlier, a problem with my camera. You just allow me to log in from my phone.
Certainly, Ambassador. Whenever you're ready. Meanwhile, I'll just take the fellows and the members of our community through the program details. Perfect. So, in addition to the mentors, guys, what we also do is we have various team building exercises, which are really, really important. We have interactive happy hours. We have international mixers. So happy hours are places where you play a lot of online games. There are a lot of interesting interactions. Some people, they bring up their musical instruments and they play. There's just a lot of different things that, happen in such happy hours. And we also have this thing called the virtual cafe, which is our innovation over here, which really includes, giving you an access to a 24/7 Zoom link where you can, just get on a call anytime you have to discuss any project. So think of it as a literal cafe that you might have in a college campus, but you have access to that. You can join in anytime. You can message your co-fellows on the WhatsApp group and ask them that, hey, is anybody free to jump on a call or, discuss this random idea that I had or discuss a particular startup. So those are the things that happen in a virtual cafe. I think His Excellency is now trying to join in, and we're going to check. Just give me a second. All right. So finally, you also write a capstone project. We help you get published as part of this fellowship program. And the only graduating requirement is that you write a capstone project, which is where you either work with organizations or you select a real life problem. And, you write a 5-page, at least a 5-page analysis of that problem and your approach to solving that particular problem. That is the only thing that we need before you graduate. And this has a particular format. This goes through a lot of plagiarism check. You get a lot of mentorship on how to craft your capstone projects better. And a lot of people have presented then these capstone projects in various conferences. In fact, we get our fellows to join in as panelists and present their ideas on various forums such as the New York Climate Week, the London Climate Action Week, on the World Cities Day with UN Habitat. So you come in as speakers on those panels as part of this fellowship program, and even later as alumni. So that is broadly the structure of the fellowship program over here with us. And now we have His Excellency Jason Keats Matthew Hall with us. Your Excellency, just want to do a very quick sound and audio check if you're all ready. We are not in a hurry. We can take time, and whenever you're ready, we'll.
Can you see me? I can't see myself.
We can see you just fine, sir.
Okay. Okay, there we go. All right. Yeah.
Perfect. First of all, a big thank you, Your Excellency, for taking out the time and joining us on a Monday evening. This is the time where we are typically closing the office work in India, but we are so grateful that you took out the time to interact with our fellows, with our community today. Just a brief introduction about His Excellency Jason Keats Matthew Hall. He's the first resident High Commissioner of Jamaica to India, as I just mentioned a while back, concurrently accredited to Nepal, Singapore, Malaysia, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. High Commissioner Hall was previously posted as Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary to Mexico, accredited to all of Central America. Prior to his diplomatic career, he serves as Deputy Director of Tourism for the Jamaica Tourist Board, as well as Regional Director at JAMPRO, Jamaica Trade and Invest, covering Caribbean, Latin America, and emerging markets, BRICS, and Australasia. At the Jamaica Tourist Board, Ambassador Hall was responsible for developing Jamaica's sport tourism policy and strategy, as well as the design, staging, and execution of the multiple award-winning Jamaica House activations at the Beijing 2008, London 2012, and Rio de Janeiro 2016 Olympic Games, and at the IAAF World Championships in Moscow 2013 and Beijing 2015. During his tenure at JAMPRO, Ambassador Hall was an integral member of the team, attracting record flows of foreign direct investment into Jamaica in tourism, BPO, agriculture, energy, and manufacturing, spanning various aspects of maritime industry, ship brokerage, port operations, crewing, ship repairs, CZM, coastal zone management, etc. In 2020, High Commissioner Hall was awarded the Order of Jose de Marsoleta in the rank of Grand Cross, the highest honor granted by Nicaragua to nationals and foreigners in recognition of their extraordinary merits and contributions to the field of international and diplomatic relations. High Commissioner Hall is a former elite athlete, competing as a 100-meter and 200-meter sprint specialist at the collegiate level and squash at the national level. A self-declared lifelong learner and committed to serve, High Commissioner Hall is passionate about sustainability, social entrepreneurship, and of course, Jamaica. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for bringing to us such a rich background and experience. And we are eagerly looking forward to learning from you about the topic of sustainability and development in the 21st century. I welcome you once again.
Thank you so much, Arpit. I don't know how much I'll be able to teach you this evening, but it certainly is an honor to be able to share with you. I noticed that you have quite an esteemed gathering of fellows with such impressive academic credentials. I sought to impart with you today, my own personal perspective based on my experience. So we could start with that and then perhaps proceed on to the question and answer period.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for having me, and good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Namaste, everyone.
Namaste.
You let me know how you would like to. Shall I just go straight into it?
Sure, Your Excellency. We'll first hear from you about your ideas and your journey. And then I will ask you certain questions, after which I will invite some of our attendees over here to ask questions of their own.
The one thing is that I'm getting notifications about admitting people in the waiting room. I don't know if I'm supposed to.
We are taking care of that. That's because you're added as a co-host. So apologies for that distraction, but we'll take care of that.
No worries. So, okay, speaking about sustainability and development, I have a rather unique perspective. And I'll share with you my background in that ground. You touched on it a little bit in the introduction, but I'll just recap. So my childhood started in Jamaica, and I grew up as the son of the conservator of forests. That's a very colonial style title. But essentially, he was an environmentalist and responsible for the management of Jamaica's forests. He was so good at his job that he went on to be appointed to work as a special project specialist in forestry with the UNDP and FAO. So I got an early insight into this multilateral approach to to sustainability specifically. So initially we were posted in the Brazilian Amazon, and he was one of the first from Brazil. We moved on to Africa, where I spent approximately 16 years, starting first in Mozambique. I went to high school, boarding school in Swaziland, now Eswatini. And whilst there, he moved from Mozambique to Sierra Leone. So what I'm sharing with you is this experience where I've lived in some of the least developed countries in the world, and tackling, if you will, grassroots, tree roots issues as they relate to sustainability and development. And one of the most profound things for me was the first time that I saw a massive tree felled in the Amazon by illegal loggers. This was a tree that was easily about 300 feet tall. I mean, a massive tree. And I don't know if you all are familiar with that age-old philosophical, esoteric question about a tree falling in a forest and whether it makes a sound if no one is around to hear it. I find that to be utter rubbish. I mean, these trees are entire microsystems, and they take out several other trees when they come down. And it's the most painful sound, you know. This is collective cry of all the birds and animals as they flush out in this frenzied exodus. And it's a most tragic thing, and that has stayed with me all my life. Another aspect of it was, you know, in Mozambique, my father was prevented. We lived in Mozambique in the late 80s, and that was in the heat of the then civil war. And so he was prevented from going out into the field, you know, to deal with their reforestation challenges that they were having there, simply because people were planting more landmines instead of trees. And that, of course, you know, speaks to some of the realities of challenges in the developing world vis-a-vis war and that sort of conflict. Mm-hmm. He moved from Mozambique to Sierra Leone. And I think there is where I have my most vivid memory, because we happen to live up in the hills of Freetown. And surrounding the house was a massive forest. And I didn't notice it at first because the forest was so vibrant. It was full of life. There were monkeys, iguanas, and snakes. You know, I have a special predilection for snakes. And my sons have it too. We're just fascinated by their movement. But I would catch all of these, you know, highly venomous creatures, and just, you know, experiment with them. But what I didn't notice at the time, because I was so distracted by this diversity of life, was that there was a constant drone emanating from this forest. And in the mornings, you would see lines of women and children. Some of the women would be, you know, the children would be between 5 and 12, youngsters, toddlers, and they would be following their mothers. The mother would have a baby on her back and even one in the womb, you know, and you saw this procession going into the forest. The drone was actually people cutting down the trees. They had a insatiable demand for fuel wood, for firewood. And so they would spend the entire day hacking away at these trees, coming out in the evening, almost like ants. You know, it felt it, and over the 4 years that I witnessed this, I noticed this, you know, it felt like one of those time-lapse videos of ants eating a locust. Because in a mere 4 years space of time, you saw the complete denudation of this hillside. And that was the reality of what they were facing. So incidentally, my first job, my first real professional experience was volunteering for a UND project where we had introduced an alternative fuel wood tree, a special species of tree that was fast growing, nitrogen fixing, and that would coppice. That's to say, when you cut the stalk of the tree, it would shoot back you know, in the place of where one was, five would come back. So it was a highly renewable source of fuel wood. And of course, you know, this was backbreaking stuff with me out in the West African forest, cutting down trees, measuring yields and growth. And it was quite fascinating. Of course, you know, the end of the day would be spent with the village elders drinking palm wine and truly immersing in the culture. So, you know, from those heady days of the 90s and having that experience, you know, I have a unique perspective on sustainability and development. And when you think about sustainability and development today, the challenges are still pretty much the same. Back then in the 80s and 90s, we were all talking about climate change. We were talking about global warming, all the issues that prevail today. Sadly, they're a little more acute now, a little more complex. And despite having recognized some of the key objectives, we're seemingly way off from really addressing the major issues. There's a mixed bag of opinion as it relates to the outcomes of the recent COP26.
Yeah.
But certainly we feel that, you know, well, I'm often accused of being too Jamaican because I'm an eternal optimist. And I am looking forward to what comes in COP27. Certainly, you know, when we think about the challenges that we faced over the past 2 years, and indeed the major impacts as a result of global climate change in the past decade, things are really becoming dire. As a small island developing state, Jamaica and SIDS, you'll note, comprise about 50 member states, 38 UN member states and 20 non-UN member states with an aggregate population of about 65 million. So it's less than 1% of the global population. It spans a broad region, the Caribbean, the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, and of course, AIS, the South China Sea. And we SIDS face unique social, economic and environmental vulnerabilities owing to the basic geophysical and structural constraints that islands face. And I'll give you a sense of some of them. So, you know, one major one is the high import costs and inconsistency of maritime flows with a heavy reliance on external markets due to the narrow resource base. So that's a very significant one. And that is manifested in the high costs of consumer items and general scarcity in a number of areas. Another factor as an island is that we all have, thankfully, exclusive economic zones, maritime zones, that is on average 28 times the size of our landmass. We may not necessarily be able to benefit from the resources of this zone, but certainly as it relates to fisheries, it's a major factor. And you know, all the majority of the natural resources we have in this case comes from access to the ocean. And this, of course, in many instances, will include a dependence on tourism. So, you know, we're particularly vulnerable to biodiversity loss and other exogenous economic shocks. Biodiversity, of course, is an important issue because you're talking about fisheries, you're talking about the coral reef, the attractions. You know, a lot of these islands rely on the pristine nature of their coral reefs because it attracts so many tourists who come to scuba dive and snorkel and see these environments. And then of course you have the matter of food security, not to mention the sustainability of the coastal zone, because you know, without your coral reefs, without your mangroves, you are completely at the mercy of the tides. And we're seeing now massive erosion of coastal plains due to this phenomenon. Of course, climate change, you know, we see manifested in hurricanes, and of course, the the 2017 tropical cyclone season was one of the most devastating and deadliest of all time, destroying communications, energy, transport infrastructure, homes, health facilities, schools. The disruption is tremendous. And the slow onset events such as sea level rise, we're already now beginning to see serious impact from that. We weren't seeing that 2 decades ago, but it's there now. And you're seeing, massive areas that are just no more, they're underwater. So with this set of vulnerabilities, when we think about development, especially as a small island developing state, we are looking particularly not only at our basic developmental needs, but also the type of investment and improve institutional capacity so that your infrastructure systems ensure your resilience in the face of these vulnerabilities, because they are going to happen. And so what's interesting now, being here in India, is seeing the way India is leading the charge on this particular front, and that's the race to resilience. And we see India setting up the headquarters for the International Solar Alliance, as well as the CDRI, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. These are very important multilateral organizations headquartered in India, which are now growing as they expand their membership and improving their reach to countries at risk. Coming out of COP26, we had a very significant initiative launched by the CDRI, which is the IRIS initiative, which is essentially initiated by India, Australia, UK, Jamaica, Fiji, and Mauritius. And it's a dedicated initiative for small island states seeking to provide quality technical and financial services to make SIDS infrastructure more resilient, and is aligned with the policy direction of SIDS accelerated modalities of action, the Samoa pathway. I believe you may be familiar with that. So where do we really go from here in light of all of this? And I am continuously, whether you want to say plagued or blessed, but music, Jamaica being the most musical country in the world based on per capita output, we're all naturally, if we're not sprinting, we're singing.
And amazing dancers too.
There you go. Thank you. But Bob Marley comes to mind constantly, and he's such an amazing lyricist. The way he put things, and this is the time now that he speaks to in his seminal call to action: get up, stand up for your rights. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. So it really calls for that global collective. We need to get up. We need to stand up. We need to step up. We need to stop up. I won't say shut up, but certainly free up, wake up, because it is dire. And one of the things I'm often given cause to think is, are we too late? Because when you think about it, if a body of water, a lake, has a exponentially growing toxic algal bloom, when the lake is half full, it's over, because the next day it's gonna double. So and this is what we're seeing. We're seeing such an unprecedented acceleration of the demise of climate change, and it's alarming. It's highly disconcerting. Certainly, COVID has presented somewhat of a setback. Though, again, applying my eternal optimistic outlook, I would tell you that COVID couldn't have happened at a better time. Because if COVID had happened 20 years ago, the dislocation to education alone, we would have lost a whole generation our ability to mobilize, utilizing the internet, it wouldn't have been there. So COVID happened at a great time, and thankfully, again, to India, because India certainly led the charge there. But we saw some stress faults in multilateralism. You know, we saw some very inequitable responses, and it gives cause for concern. Certainly, you know, 3 years ago, there was no such thing as vaccine diplomacy. So, you know, we see major changes taking place in multilateralism, in diplomacy. But it's really through initiatives such as yours, engaging your youth, and not only dialoguing the issues, but really delving into them, exploring solutions. I know that India is positioning themselves as the knowledge capital of the world. And I was once called upon to speak at a function with some universities. And I said, it's great, you know, you're attracting people to come to India. But if one thing COVID did, you know, it may have separated us physically with all of the quarantine and what have you, but it brought us together closer digitally.
Absolutely.
And so an opportunity to extend classrooms beyond the confines of a campus. And certainly, you know, that is a fundamental change in pedagogy as we know it. And so India, in leading that charge to become the knowledge capital, really ought to particularly engage our part of the world by way of promulgating and encouraging research on issues affecting us there. Certainly, you've made great strides on dealing with some of the issues here in this part of the world, but certainly as you take into consideration a region such as the Caribbean, which is largely comprised of SIDS, which faces, you know, these vulnerabilities that I spoke of, how do we get Indian institutions to collaborate with Caribbean institutions to broaden that research base, to academically investigate and ferret out solutions for these challenges that we're facing now? Certainly, the way education has changed, we're no longer, you know, I'm a bit of a dinosaur, I'm accused of being, simply because, you know, we learned differently. When I was going to school, you know, studying for my O levels, you had to cram so much information, and I don't recall an ounce of it now. I was learning known solutions to known problems. But now we are in the face of great uncertainty, the great unknown. And so students need to learn a whole different skill set. It's about looking at problem solving, critical thinking. I dare say even subject matter such as entrepreneurship.
Absolutely.
Sustainability. All of these things should be what the new curriculum is about, and the new approach to learning. You know, with Google and calculators, I don't think we need to memorize our times tables anymore, or history dates. That information is readily available at your fingertips. But it's what you do with that information. It's how you process that. It's how you critically compare and evaluate trends and identify problems, and of course solutions. So with that, I leave it there, because I think I could really ramble on about the ails, but certainly as it relates to sustainability and development, we've seen major changes. We've seen different approaches. We've seen donor agencies fully transform the way they used to go to work in Africa specifically. You know, the days of aid are significantly different. I've often liked the adage, you know, you teach a man to, you give a man a fish, you condemn him to eternal dependence. But you teach him how to fish, and you give him resilience and resourcefulness. So that, I think, is a critical change that we are now witnessing, or we have been witnessing for some time. The Indian approach of South-South collaboration is heartening to see in motion. Vasudeva Kutumbakam is a reality, although not all families get along. We all know about that. So there's still work to be done. But certainly, you know, if we concert among ourselves, there I go again with another musical pun, but if we concert together to fashion these solutions, to really step up to the plate and make the tough decisions, because there are some tough decisions to be made and some tough actions. But if there's one thing that we see, especially in this COVID test, is that there is resilience and there is a collective will. And those are perhaps the two most important ingredients in the future and the way forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. I think, we could not have had a more apt set of observations and remarks as an inaugural lecture for the cohort of our fellowship. I absolutely, even though, we did not get the time to talk to you in detail about what our fellowship program entails, even though we gave you a overview, this was exactly the sort of things that we were always bothered by. I was teaching at the San Francisco State University, and I had studied from the worst schools to the best schools in India and outside of it. And we realized during COVID, actually this fellowship started during COVID, that in this time of crisis, there is perhaps an opportunity to connect people from all over the world through this medium of internet, and get mentors and students from all over the world to talk about real problems and real solutions, as opposed to discussing about non-problems and non-solutions, as you very aptly said. So thank you so much for that. I have to tell the attendees that we did not brief the ambassador on that. He came up, he addressed it on his own. So a few questions from my side, Your Excellency. I remember that, when I was going through a master's program, one of the biggest questions that we had when we were talking about climate change, public policy, etc., was this question of energy transitions and moving over to renewable energies, etc., etc. And one project that I worked on was related to the Victon wind farms in Jamaica. Now, if it would be very instructive if you could talk about Jamaica's achievements in the sphere of renewable energy, and what are some of the things that others in the world could learn about that. Before we do that, we have a mentor, Mr. Curtis Renauld, who has just joined us. He is from St. Lucia, and he's a UN veteran. Worked, in for a long time with the Secretary General of the United Nations, and also on various UN commissions on disarmament. Mr. Renauld, if you're here and if you can hear us, I would be very much obliged if you could say hello to all of the attendees, and would be very glad to introduce His Excellency Ambassador Jason Hall to you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm just trying to get my new iPad together, so I'm very pleased to be here, and I look forward to engaging in the coming discussion. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Renauld. Always a pleasure to have you with us. So, Ambassador, back to you about the questions on renewable energy, because for us, that feels like that is one of the most important aspects. We can see you now, Mr. Renauld. Thank you so much.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. So, Ambassador, over to you. That as I was saying, that that I think is one of the most important parts of the equation when we talk about how to solve for climate change. Because if we are still blowing up all of the carbon emitting fuel, then we are just not going to get there. There's no way that we can get there without renewable energy. So, what have been some of the successes in Jamaica? If you could talk about that, please.
So it's interesting that you raised that. Jamaica is a rather interesting study in that regard. If we look at our current energy consumption by sector, residential consumes about 37% of the total demand. Small commercial is the largest with 43%. Large power industrial is a mere 17%, and public lighting accounts for 2%. So that's an interesting scenario.
Yeah.
When you're trying to think about how are you going to get greener with your energy demand. And obviously the big potential there is in residential, is the scope for greening residential energy consumption. If we look at the consumption mix, fossil fuels account for 89% of the energy mix. Wind is, which you rightly pointed to Wigton, which is a fascinating project and development in the middle of Jamaica. That accounts for 6.5%. Hydro is only 3.5%. And Jamaica, one of the things about Jamaica and most Caribbean countries, St. Lucia included, is that you have this beautiful topography of rich, lush mountains and amazing rivers. A lot of rivers and waterfalls. So that potential for hydroelectricity is very strong. And solar is still rather small, despite some significant inroads in that regard. So currently solar is between 1% and 2%. So what the government of Jamaica has done is, and this is in keeping with our commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals, and this is important, but I hasten to add, and I hope, and I do so purely for academic reasons. A small island like Jamaica adhering to 100% SDG goals does not help us
change the world.
Those targets. But it's important that we all do it, and in so all doing that we collectively achieve this. So Jamaica set about establishing an integrated resource plan, or IRP, which details the electricity generation investment required each year from 2018 to 2037. So in this plan, the government plans to procure about over 500 megawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2025. So that's just around the corner, and we're not quite there yet. Our mandate is to increase electricity generation through renewable energy to the national grid of 50% by 2037, moving from its current generation of approximately 14%. So, and within that, we also have a national waste to energy investment solution. So if you think at the current scenario, the total installed capacity is about 1,025 megawatts. The normal base load is about 425 megawatts. So it's a significant surplus. And the peak demand would be about 667 megawatts. And in that mix, wind and solar account for 320 megawatts. LNG is 120 megawatts, and hydro, biomass, or waste to energy, 74 megawatts. That's the plan. And as a region, we're looking to more effectively roll out international solar alliance related initiatives, because whereas we may not as islands have a lot of land space, the whole business of a floating solar plant is very viable. And I particularly like the way the International Solar Alliance is looking to establish one global grid.
Absolutely.
Because the sun is always shining somewhere on the planet.
Yeah.
And so to the extent that we're able to connect up in that regard, I think it's a beautiful objective and vision to have.
In fact, on that, I would love to send you a paper that was written by the OST officer on special duty of the Renewable Energy Minister, Mr. R.K. Singh. So his OST,
Yes.
who happens to be actually from the police cadres, but has taken a big lead on setting up the International Solar Alliance from India, wrote a very informative paper for the think tank that we run, Global Policy Insights. And I think that could be very insightful, and I would be glad to share it with you over emails and that.
I would be most grateful if you could share that, as well as any other information and document. I would welcome that. And this is really, what these types of interventions can yield is this mass sharing. If we could make some of these things viral, as we do TikTok videos, or if we could distill it down into a TikTok video, just think of what we could achieve.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm reminded of this phrase that somebody said, that the best minds of my generation are making, Instagram and TikTok videos. And, we only wish that we can get more of the best minds to work on some of these problems, which are really important, and probably integrate them into TikTok videos. So why not? One more question. I have a number of questions for you, Your Excellency, but after this question, I'll open it to the audience, and then in between come in with my own. My question is that, what is your vision of the Jamaican-Indian partnership as the first resident High Commissioner of Jamaica in India? And, what are the ways in which you foresee building and leveraging this relationship between these two countries, which go far back in history in terms of having great relations with each other?
Yes, in fact, we go back 179 years, back to the 1840s, when the first Indians arrived in the Caribbean. Interestingly, or ironically, and I'm trying to not see any controversy here, they came at the abolition of slavery, which in and of itself,
yes,
is a subject and an occurrence in our history that warrants far more focus and attention than is currently meted out to it. And therein is a very much needed debate on the subject of reparation, but I won't go there. So having said that, Indians came to our country, to our region, and essentially salvaged the economy, which was a plantation-based economy, and they came to salvage the sugar industry. So that's been quite a very tragically overwrought history. Now, fast forward, Jamaica and India are actually this year celebrating 60 years. Jamaica is celebrating 60 years of independence from Britain, who played a major role in that slavery. But we're also celebrating 60 years of uninterrupted diplomatic relations with India. And in particular, what we're seeing unfold, especially this year, is a great strides in terms of the strengthening of that relationship. In May, we received for the highest level visit from India by Rashtrapatiji Ramnath Kovind. And that was an amazing visit. You know, it was, I had the great honor and privilege to fly back to Jamaica and welcome him with the Prime Minister and the Governor General. And that visit just heralded the next level that we are now approaching. And my vision is essentially to build on that relationship. But in so doing, what I am keen to establish is first of all, to raise awareness about Jamaica in India. Thankfully, you know, thanks to cricket, they know about the West Indies, which is another bit of the history, which takes us even further back than the 179 years when we discovered one Christopher Columbus lost on a Jamaican beach thinking he had found India.
Yeah.
And I used to resent the term West Indies because I thought, why are we glorifying this man's inability to navigate? But now I quite like it because it brings us together, you know, and that is what I envisage, is raising the level of awareness of our region, Jamaica, not only as a place to visit, because naturally it is a place you must visit. Jamaica
Absolutely.
It's an incredibly beautiful and astounding country. And when you think about that culture, you know, that it's from this small country of 2.7 million people, emerges a global cultural superpower that's manifested in our sport and our music. And so it's a place you have to visit. But it's not just a destination to visit, it's a destination to invest in, simply because Jamaica, if you look at the map of the West Indies or the Caribbean or the Americas, Jamaica is smack bang right in the middle. And this strategic geographic positioning lends itself to Jamaica being an excellent gateway for Indian innovation to the entire region, not only to Central America, South America, and the Caribbean, but the entire Americas. It's an excellent nearshore destination to the USA. So when you think of business process outsourcing and digital services, Jamaica is actually the leading BPO destination in the Caribbean at this time. And we're seeing significant investment from India in the BPO sector. So one of my measures of success will be the extent to which I'm able to further strengthen that connection. But it's more than that, you know, when we talk about alternative energy, you know, and that we spoke about what ISA is doing, education, medical services, manufacturing. Jamaica has a value proposition that is unique and compelling. You know, I would share with your viewership the interesting fact that the Jamaican Stock Exchange in 2015 and 2018 was the #1 stock exchange in the world, showing a growth of 236%. The #2 was Vietnam, and they were only 176. And so what you're seeing is decades, of course, in the making, but successive governments putting in the right fiscal policy, an enabling environment, if you will, to see through this level of dynamism. And now emerging out of COVID, we're seeing a resurgence, a rebound, if you will, certainly in tourism. We were one of the first countries to open up last year, May, in the middle of COVID, and we continue to grow strength to strength in that regard. So my objective would be to strengthen that relationship further. Jamaica and India have always been side by side in multilateral fora. If you go alphabetically, J comes after I. So we're right there in the thick of it, and we've supported India in numerous initiatives, as has India supported us. And there is scope for further strengthening in that regard to leverage the advances in technology, in medicine, in alternative energy that obtain here, to literally present Jamaica as a gateway for that Indian innovation to the region. And of course, we want to see many more Indian tourists coming to Jamaica. And to that end, we've removed the visa requirement. There is no visa requirement
awesome.
for Indians to visit Jamaica. And I would add finally that this year India had its best showing at the Olympics. Now, the Olympics and Jamaica have a very special history because Jamaica has won over 1/3 of the total medals to be won in the sprint events, the 100 meters, 200 meters, 110 hurdles, 400 meters, 4x1 and 4x4 at the Olympics and the World Championships in the modern era. It's again, 2.7 million people winning over 1/3. And currently the fastest man, fastest woman, fastest mother, fastest boy, and fastest girl are all from Jamaica. So we have been quietly training a few Indians at home. They've come to Jamaica, and in fact, this is something we do. We impart some of that technical skill capacity. So I believe in this 1.4, soon to be 1.5 billion people, there is another Usain Bolt waiting. I believe he's somewhere in Kerala. You never know. But this is a two-way. And then of course, in that bid, I would hope to have more meaningful and frequent cultural exchanges at various levels. You know, both of our countries have incredible cultures, and I've seen it firsthand merge organically when I once visited a set on Bollywood, where the dance moves were cribbed straight out of a dance hall in Jamaica. And so, you know, this is something that happened organically without any intervention. But I would like to see it even further strengthened. I mean, one of the reasons, you know, you may ask me, how is it that Jamaicans are able to do so well at the Olympics? You know, we're second only to the USA with their 300+ million people. And, you know, there's so many factors. I actually do a lecture on it.
Oh, really?
I won't preempt because that'll be my next invitation to present to your group. But one of the reasons is because we dance so much.
Oh, yeah.
And that dancing, you know, 3 hours on the dance floor trains muscles you didn't even know you had. Gives you that physical coordination, but also the ability to stay calm in the most stressful, the most tense situations. As a sprinter, I will tell you, when you get down on your blocks, on your mark in 100 meters, you have 10 seconds to justify 5 years of training. 10 seconds. And if your mind is not there, if you are not in the zone, so to speak, there is no way you're going to finish on that medal podium. And so it's that ability that we have to relax and be cool.
No, absolutely. As I told you on the phone call that, you know, one of my best friends, who's Jonathan, he's not here right now, but it was the first friend that I made in grad school is from Jamaica, and now he's a member of the steering committee of the UN South-South Cooperation, and learned a lot of great dancing moves, and we learned to appreciate each other's rums. So I used to get the Indian old monk, and he would make me taste, you know, one of the best ones that Jamaica has. So certainly, you know, I agree that there's a lot of natural, you know, cultural affinity between Jamaica and India. I would want to invite some of the audience members. If you have questions, don't feel shy. You can raise your hands, and as you can see, we are having a very relaxed conversation. So you can raise your hands and you can introduce yourself, and please ask His Excellency your questions. Anybody from... Okay, we have one in the chat box and we have one hand raised. So let me just take the question from Saksham first, and then we'll take the question in the chat box. Saksham, over to you.
Good evening, sir. Namaste from India. I am a law student pursuing my bachelor's degree from Kanpur, Uttar Pradesh, India. I have attended such like a session first time, and I am delighted and humble, fortunate enough that I have meet such a good persons. Like I can't say like I find anywhere else. So, sir, I have a doubt. Like we have a strong relations like Jamaica and India, and like for the COVID one, the references are like the problems are coming from another part of the world. So how do you see like what are the better better steps can be taken to do a better diplomacy at that time?
I'm not sure if I understand the question. You're saying that, you know, there is that problems originate from elsewhere outside of our region. How do we better create an environment of cooperation between different views?
Yes, sir. Apart from that.
So, you know, there's no clear solution. This is something that the world has been contended with for centuries. There's always poles, there's always polarization, there's always differing views, differing interests. And the business of diplomacy is firstly centered on having dialogue, because once you're able to dialogue, then positions can be put forward in a fashion where they can be rationally thought out and solutions can be proffered. So the first step is dialogue. The second step, of course, is the matter of accountability. And this is where I think many diplomatic initiatives founder, the lack of accountability. This can only be achieved by a collective effort and holding people accountable for actions is very challenging no matter what. The one thing, though, is that if we all adapt a principle of non-intervention, respect for sovereignty, non-interference, these are the tenets of good diplomacy. But as I said, there's no clear solution. We have to really discard our differences, because one of the great inhibitors to effective dialogue is the different points of view. I have a philosophy in life, and the philosophy is that no one thing is one thing only. That means that several things can be true at the same time. And I think if this viewpoint, this perspective is adopted, then we will have less conflict, less vehement conflicts where people violently oppose points of views. Because once we can accept that two viewpoints, though opposing, are equally valid and true, then we can find ways to accommodate, to make compromises, to seek meaningful exchanges. And so I believe the solution is really through this type of dialogue. we have to start with the youth. It's the youth of the world. You know, the youth represent 25% of the world's population, but they are 100% of the world's future.
Yeah.
And so dialogue, especially at the top level of the people who are in power and the decision makers, is needed. But dialogue at the youth level is also critical. My personal experience was that I went to a high school, a United World College, that was founded to prevent future world wars. And so it encouraged multinationalism, culturalism, cultures coming together where you could learn each other's culture without belittling or degrading the other's culture, and come together. You know, one of the greatest outputs at that level was when we all got together and did a concert. And you saw all of these different musical styles, ways of singing come together in one harmonic chorus. And so if you take from that an approach to life where everybody has a value, everybody has a strength, and you know, if your hand is like this, you know, the fingers apart can't do much, but when they're together, that's when you have the power. So it's seeking those ways to bring people together, to dialogue, and to concert among themselves to fashion meaningful solutions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ambassador. The next question is from Jay. Jay, if you might want to unmute yourself and introduce yourself and ask your question.
Sure. Thank you so much, Arpit. Good evening, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you so much for joining GPODS community and delivering this such a special session to us and to all the participants. And I'm really glad most of the people are finding this session really helpful and insightful. Mr. Ambassador, I'm recently working with Young Professional Foreign Policy Tokyo chapter, and we are holding up LECOI event, which is an UN accredited organization. And to really understand that what incentives national government are getting to participate in making of the global treaty I'm really sorry, to participate in global environment treaty making efforts, and why UN is resistant to offering NGOs a more full-fledged role in the treaty making process. Thank you.
I'm not sure I understand the first part of the question. Could you repeat it?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes,
Yes.
Jay, you're audible.
Yeah,
if you could
so-
repeat the first part of your question.
Sure. So my first part was, what are the incentives for national government to participate in the global environment treaty making efforts?
So, you know, there are no other tangible incentives than what obtains when a multilateral body gets together and they craft specific objectives. And it's the people present at those gatherings and meetings that are able to see the value in consensus. But in terms of, you know, there's no single body meeting out incentives to those individual countries. One of the things that we see coming up now is the whole business of green financing, and therein lies some incentives. So we're seeing development aid being predicated on a prerequisite green capacity or outlook. You know, so for example, you will see a company seeking to invest in a particular sector, but that the investment will be contingent on that country's commitment by way of policy framework to green and enabling policies. So it's sort of the incentive in this case is that the countries have to show a commitment to undertaking sustainable development by way of having a set framework of policies and regulations before they're able to draw down on that investment. What was the second part of the question?
How NGOs can be helpful while making and developing of the policies?
So the NGOs participate in that mix. They're part of the stakeholder mix in that, and you know, you have different level NGOs, and they themselves also create their own set of policy framework, whereby, you know, their modus operandi, their operating guidelines are predicated on the pre-existence of certain conditions. So they, you know, for example, will not engage with a country unless certain preconditions are in place by way of, you know, having a specific legislative framework, specific regulatory framework. So it's really, at this stage of the game, it's all about engaging multiple stakeholders. The government is a stakeholder, the NGOs are a stakeholder, the corporates are a stakeholder, and indeed the private citizens are stakeholders. So to the extent that everybody is aware of what the objectives are, so clearly defined national objectives and strategies on how to attain those objectives are critical success factor for these being implemented and adhered to.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you. And Shrishti, over to you.
Thank you, Arpit. Thank you so much, Ambassador. This has been a wonderful presentation and super enlightening to all of us. You did, of course, touch upon the fact that Jamaica has a strong focus on sustainable tourism and sustainable agriculture. And my question kind of stems from that. I was hoping to ask you if you could share with us some ways which, according to you, you feel particularly how sustainable tourism can be promoted between India and Jamaica bilaterally. So what are some ways that through which you feel sustainable tourism can be promoted between India and Jamaica?
So one of the interesting things about tourism, you know, there's often a question: is tourism ultimately sustainable? There are various types of tourism. Let's look, for example, at one of the fastest segments of the global tourism industry, and that's cruise shipping. Cruise shipping is the fastest growing segment. We see the proliferation of bigger ships, the deployment of these ships all over the world. But let's think about what that carbon footprint looks like and whether that is ultimately sustainable. I'm not going to delve into those things, and I'm not going to answer those questions. I'm simply putting them out there to frame my response. Another aspect about tourism is the way the industry is structured. Oftentimes, you will see a destination, a small island, where, you know, it's a tropical paradise. A travel agent books the ticket, a tour operator organizes the room, the airfare, even down to the transportation and the clothes that you wear on that vacation. All of those earnings don't touch the country. They never touch the country. So this is what we refer to as leakages in tourism. How do we therefore make tourism sustainable? Because if there is significant leakage, it cannot be sustained.
Sure.
If it is extractive in nature, and we've seen what extractive industries do, they're unsustainable. So when we talk about sustainability in tourism in Jamaica specifically, we can't, from where we stand, dictate rules on carbon footprint, you know, the emissions of the aircraft. I once saw how Greta Thunberg took a sailboat to come and
Yeah.
attend this UN thing. And I was thinking to myself, how does that translate to mass tourism? Because surely, there are going to be some challenges. I also now see where when you book your tourism package, you actually get an index that speaks to the carbon footprint of your vacation, because ultimately consumers are becoming more conscious about this and more conscientious. So as a destination, you really have very little control about this, because at the end of the day, that's an external factor. The plane comes and you take it from there, or the ship comes and you take it from there. So what we sought to do in tourism in Jamaica is to explore ways in which, and I should point out that tourism in the Jamaican economy is very interesting, simply because it's such a multiplier. So for context, Jamaica receives, between cruise and stopover visitors, almost 5 million tourists per annum. The population is 2.7%. So right away, you start to see, and with a smaller island, that disparity is even greater. You look at the Cayman Islands, for example. Those figures amount to roughly $5 billion in tourism earnings. And our objective is to minimize those leakages and replace them with linkages. So I mentioned before that tourism is a multiplier industry. It doesn't just include the hospitality side of things. Yes, the hospitality, the hotel employs workers. So the employment factor is huge. I mean, in Jamaica, roughly 25% of the workforce is employed either directly or indirectly to tourism. But then, you have the transportation sector, you have the agricultural sector. Yep. We sought to encourage our hoteliers, because on the one hand, we're out there seeking investment in tourism. We're inviting people to come and build hotels on our island. But you cannot, in creating an enabling environment for them, you cannot put too many strictures on them and dictates. So it's important to facilitate the type of linkages with, say, for example, the agricultural sector. Therein, you'll find that multiplier really takes off, because the tourism industry consumes the fruits of the agricultural industry. And it's a closed circle. There's no leakage. And similarly, you go down the line through the value chain at all the possible arenas. And in Jamaica in particular, one of the areas that we've pioneered and done very well at, because as I said earlier, there are different types of tourism. And in the early days of our tourism, we saw a proliferation of the all-inclusive hotel, where you paid one fee and you went to the hotel and you stayed and you ate and you drink everything at the hotel. And what you found was that this created a bubble.
Yep.
And so the benefits of that tourism did not extend to the community. People were employed in the community, but there was money being spent that didn't reach the community. So what we sought to do was introduce a type of community-based tourism, where the community now becomes involved in the tourism. The community gets behind the management and ownership of the attractions, and the guests are invited to leave the hotel and go out into the community. In truth and in fact, this is an important aspect of tourism. In an earlier campaign at the Tourist Board, we set about a call to action that spoke to whether you're a tourist or a traveler. And a tourist goes and visits, checks a list of sites, and has the picture, has a selfie, and goes home and shows people. But the traveler does these things as well, but takes a step further. And the traveler, in traveling and experiencing, not only learns something new about where they are, but they learn something about themselves. What I've found is that in traveling all my life, I never do touristy things. I go and I live there. I go and I live the life, and it teaches me something about the people there, but it also teaches me something about myself. And so community-based tourism affords that, and therefore spreading and generating the awareness about this aspect and facilitating the type of cultural experiences that, you know, afford you the opportunity to be a traveler, to learn something about yourself. That is all about promoting that community-based tourism. So the main initiative there is how you empower and include that community in those tourist resorts areas to minimize the leakage and create the linkage. As it relates to Indians and the sustainability thereof, as I said earlier, we have removed the visa requirement, and we are looking to present Jamaica, as I said earlier, not only as a destination to visit, but as a destination to visit, to invest in. And so, you know, that's a term that emerged some time ago, which is called bleisure, business and pleasure, business and leisure. And that's something that is one area that we're looking at. Another aspect of it really is encouraging that flow, because you must remember that we have an Indian population in Jamaica.
Yeah.
So there is that cultural connection, there is that cultural affinity, and that's something that we can facilitate and encourage a wider scope of engagement. And so there are a number of other initiatives that are to come forward. Certainly, Jamaica is the leading honeymoon destination in the world. And we know Indians are very big on their weddings.
Oh, yeah.
And one way we can help with that is to, you know, by having a destination wedding, you no longer have the onus of the huge invitation list, because not everyone
certainly
certainly provide a cost-efficient solution in that regard. But we are continuously innovating and renovating our tourism product, and we have a level of diversity that caters to every passion point, whether you're coming to have a heritage experience and explore history, visit Port Royal, you know, once the center of the Western Hemisphere and home of the swashbuckling pirates. You can actually go there. You can go to Port Royal and step back in time, to faith-based tourism, to sports tourism. Jamaica is a leading golf destination, and of course, you know, to come to Jamaica and see firsthand it is that Usain Bolt came to run the way he runs by watching some of the local track meets is an experience unto itself. And of course, there's cricket, there's football, there's rugby, there are marine sports, boating. There really is a wide array of offerings, including ecotourism and wellness. One of the things about Jamaica is that being an island, there's a certain Darwinian principle that applies with all the fruits and vegetables that grow there. They're completely unique. I wish that I could mail to each of you a Jamaican banana, because you would be so shocked at the difference in taste in something as simple and mundane as a banana. Even the Alfonso mango, which we call the Bombay mango in Jamaica, tastes completely, well, you can recognize.
Oh, you grow that over there as well?
Oh, yes, that's my favorite mango.
And have you tried the whole range of mangoes in India during your stay?
I am very actively pursuing that quest.
Well, we should let us help you with that quest this time. Well, thank you so much, Your Excellency, for such a detailed answer. I think leaving with a number of things over here. The difference between a traveler and a tourist, that's something that's going to stay with me for a long time. And also your insights about leakages and interlinkages. This leakage concept was not something that I'd ever come across earlier, and that's a very important concept from that regard. And thank you so much for educating us on a whole range of subjects. I mean, what better than in an inaugural lecture than to learn about the interlinkages really about sustainability and diplomacy and public policy. So thank you so much for leaving us with a lot of insights, and thank you so much for sparing so much time. We would love to, for those of us who are in Delhi, we'd love to meet you in person sometime and continue our relationship, not only regarding this, but also regarding partnerships in education between Jamaica and India, and sharing some of our research that we do over here to mutually beneficial outcomes. So thank you so much for that.
Well, please feel welcome to visit if you're ever in New Delhi. I'm located at B8/2 Vasant Vihar. I'll hold my card here. I don't know if that's legible.
Grab a screenshot of that. Yep.
And my email is hc-jhcindia@mfaft.gov.jm. And I would be more than happy, time permitting, to welcome anybody who comes. Can't promise you a rum or a coffee. It depends on what. But I'm always keen to share on Jamaica and to learn about India. I think this is an incredibly fascinating country, and as is Jamaica, and that there is tremendous potential to be had all around. And so I'm very keen to be a part of that process.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, and hope you have a great evening and a great week ahead. Thank you so much.
Same to you.
Thank you.
Dhanyavad.
Dhanyavad.